Okay, so you've logged into Soundtrap, and now as the sound mixer for your team, you're going to create that podcast. So you're going to click Enter Studio. Now once it's loaded, you'll see all of these different templates. Okay, the podcast one we've already listened to as a class, as an example. So what you're going to do is instead do blank. Then up here, you're going to rename it the name of your team's podcast. So whatever that title is. I'm going to use Star Testing as my team's example. Now, where it says Add New Track, this is where you're going to create a track for each type of audio you're going to have in the podcast. Voice microphones, and then if you're going to be recording on the computer itself or through the app, then you would say Allow. But you've already basically have these audio files recorded. So here where it says voice, computer, mic, enhancer, all of these different choices, they don't really matter if you are not going to be recording, okay? If you are going to be recording, then go ahead and open it up and click podcast. Okay, so that's created that first track. Notice it defaults to mic. This is where you're going to rename this file. And at this point, you're going to rename them according to how they're going to appear in the audio as it plays. So I would probably start out with some type of introduction. And what format of introduction you're going to do will depend on the style of the podcast you want to have as a team.
So remember, in the different stations, the scriptwriter was in charge of learning how to get in and out of the tape. That means how you're introducing different elements of your recordings. So in that training, there were different examples of how to potentially do an intro. It doesn't have to be a basic introduction that identifies who's speaking and podcast is about. There were lots of examples there. So that's something you want to think about when you go to creating the intro. Back to the tracks. So here you're going to add the different tracks according to what is going to be in the podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then jump to how you're going to import the files you've created. Okay, so I've created my basic tracks. Now notice I just have generic titles like interview, vox pop, ambi, and so on. You can make these more specific. Let's say you have 3 or 4 interviews. Add a separate track for each interview, or you can put them all on one. But I would recommend creating a separate track for your different types of audio. Then now how do you insert them into this track? Well, we'll hit these 3 little dots, and then where you see import, only on a Chromebook do you have this advantage. So you want to do this initially on a Chromebook, and then you can move to a different computer, even your computer at home, once you have the files imported. So here you can click Google Drive, My Drive, and then if that folder was shared with me, which it probably was, you click on Shared with Me, and then you look for that folder named Podcast Audio. This is my example folder, but remember, the folder that should have all the audio from your team is titled Podcast Audio. So when you open that folder, then you're going to look for that audio file to import in that particular track. So I'm just going to use this as my example here. And it has loaded it. Notice it loaded it where the playhead is. So if I want to move it, it's not a problem. You see it has these little tracks. Once it's in there, then you can move it wherever you start the playhead at. Okay? You're going to continue to do that for all of your audio files. The beauty of doing this in a Chromebook is it's connected to your Google Drive already. Otherwise, you'd have to download the files to the computer and then import them into Soundtrap. Okay, on to the next step.
Now at this point, you want to start importing the audio that you've already recorded. If you have an intro or something the host or narrator hasn't recorded yet, you can record right there on that track if needed. But for now, what you want to do is find the audio that you've saved in that podcast audio folder. So right here, on a Chromebook only, you can go intro, or I'm sorry, you can go to the, okay. So you want to start importing the audio. So you can click those little lines, and only on a Chromebook will it connect to your Google Drive. So there's an advantage to using a Chromebook. When you click import, it's going to give you the option. Do you want to import it from the actual downloads on that computer or your Google Drive? So this is where you're going to search for that folder. You may have to look in Shared with Me and look for that podcast audio folder, okay? Notice I have several examples. That's from teaching in class how to do this. So you would find that audio folder, podcast audio, and then you would import that particular audio that you want to import. Notice this doesn't give me a lot of details, so make sure that you're looking for the right files before you import it into a track. And notice there it imported at the playhead. So if I put the playhead back here, then it will import that audio where I want it to go. Okay, now you can watch the next video.